We look at potential offseason surprises for the Ravens in 2022 and more next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We are free and available on all platforms, and thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're back here on a midweek edition on Wednesday. That does mean our mailbag episode, and we have two segments of mailbag questions here today. Again, thank you to everybody who does submit mailbag questions. I do really appreciate it. It's fun to get that engagement, but we'll answer those in the second and third segments. In the first segment, we'll talk a bit about Ravens news notes and quotes, talking about a coach that the Ravens have reportedly lost, some videos of Lamar Jackson throwing the football. That's huge, right? That's huge right now to see, especially just a couple days after the Super Bowl, and some other stuff as well in those general Ravens news notes and quotes. And then in the second and third segments with those mailbag questions, talking a bit about some potential surprises that the Ravens could have in store during this 2022 offseason. Again, a pivotal one. The Ravens can be sometimes unpredictable, and that's a good thing, I feel like, because, stuff can blindside you. And look, sometimes it can be bad, and it's like, oh, why did they do that? But sometimes it can be actually really good. And, it's a move that's unexpected, but one where you're thinking, you know what? That actually makes a little bit of sense. So we'll dive into those in the second and third segment. So a jam-packed episode here today, and we're in both audio and video form. If you're here with us on YouTube, thank you for tuning in video form. You can see my face and my background. Our first goal here on YouTube is 1,000 subscribers. We're getting close. We're building every day. We're growing. It's amazing. Thank you to everybody who has already subscribed. And if you're thinking about it, you're like, I don't really know, you can hit it, and it would really help me out a ton. Also, if you would like the video, that's another way to help this get in front of more people so that we can have more conversations surrounding the Ravens, whether you're watching this is the premiere at 6 a.m. or content comes out at 6 a.m. Eastern time or just on your own time. Thank you. But we're also in audio form. We've been in audio form to start. And thank you for everybody who's listening in audio form, whether that's on your way to work or wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Thank you. Be sure to turn notifications on and follow me on Twitter at KOstreicher34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's talk about these Ravens news notes and quotes here, just some general stuff. And we'll start off with Lamar Jackson, as Lamar Jackson posted some videos on his Instagram story of him throwing the football. And it was a great thing, obviously, because Lamar Jackson obviously suffered that injury in week 14 against the Cleveland Browns, that bone bruise in his ankle. It can be tough to come back from those, and they're very unpredictable depending on where it is. Jackson did talk about how, he wanted to come back and play, but the medical team was very careful, and I think that was the absolute right decision. But Lamar Jackson already working, he looks like he is fully, or at least close to fully healed. Obviously, we don't know that for certain until he says something, and who knows if he ever will, but it was nice to see him out on the field. He was throwing to Rashad Bateman. The Ravens posted a video of him throwing to Rashad Bateman with the caption, Lamar Jackson to Rashad Bateman. It looks like James Prochet was also there. So Jackson had talked about how he wanted to go out with his guys and kind of get that team chemistry up. He said that was a part of the season where he didn't feel like it was as strong as it should be. And look, I agree that it is very important. And we've seen Lamar Jackson go to Arizona with his guys, Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, J.K. Dobbins, and have those training sessions. Rashad Bateman was there as well. So it's good for the team to get together, to get timing down, to work on mechanics, to work on certain little things that you want to kind of iron out. It's good to do that in the offseason. And we've seen Lamar Jackson, like the transformations, right? We've seen it because he lays out his journey. Now, some players prefer to do that. Others don't really. It's more of the whole, hey, I'm going to move in silence type thing. I don't have an issue either way. I think either is completely fine, whether their players want to do that or not. But we've seen the transformation from Lamar Jackson, that offseason transformation. We've seen it with Marquise Brown. So it seems like this Ravens team really wants, people to understand and know that, hey, we're working here. But Lamar Jackson also posted on Twitter that, they're not going to talk about that that revenge tour until it actually comes. He responded to a graphic there. So it was good to see Jackson actually throwing the football, and obviously with the teammates there, that makes it even better because you see some of the progress he's already making now. It's not like, it's night and day, like, oh wow, he's doing this so much better now. It's only been a couple of days after the Super Bowl. He's still probably trying to feel a bit comfortable on that ankle. We don't know how long he's been throwing for, if this was the first time, this, that, and the other, but he clearly is someone who is very competitive, who wants to get better. He and his teammates want a Super Bowl so badly. They talk about it so much. We've heard it in the pressers and just what they're talking about. And we've heard answers in those pressers about how, it's a lot of what we talk about on the field and the building. So they're hungry for it. They're going to work for it. And we saw that firsthand with that video, or the videos that surfaced of Lamar Jackson throwing the football. The Ravens also lose another coach. We've talked about the coaching carousel this team has been on really over the past couple of seasons and dating back a while now, where they have been regarded as, one of these teams that have a ton of coaches who are ready for other opportunities. And so the Ravens have parted ways with Don Martindale. They've brought in Mike Macdonald, or I guess brought back Mike Macdonald. They've seen a couple of other assistant coaches go elsewhere as well, like Rob Ryan, Drew Wilkins, etc. They brought in other guys, Zach Orr. But the Ravens, on Tuesday, it was reported by Jess Rebeck of The Athletic that the Ravens are losing their assistant offensive line coach, Richard Angolo, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. He'll be the tight ends coach over there in Jacksonville. So the Ravens will, again, it's more of the shuffling of the coaching staff. And I don't necessarily think that many expected the coaching staff to shuffle the way it did. Like, I know the parting of ways with Don Martindale was pretty surprising to some, myself included at first, just the whole timing of it. But then you think about it, you're like, that makes sense. I know many were expecting or wanting or whatever the firing of Greg Roman. Obviously, that does not seem like it is in the cards for right now. So the Ravens have had to kind of maneuver their coaching staff, look at different ways to say, hey, we like our guys, but how can we improve and get better? Other teams have wanted to look at guys as well. So I think the Ravens, again, we talked about this a bit earlier, where they've done a good job at not just focusing on veteran coaches or just focusing on younger coaches. They have a veteran and young mix, and I think that is the right way to do it. Some coaches just resonate better with players, and I think the Ravens have done a good job of finding those coaches. Not every hire is going to be this amazing hire where it's like, oh yeah, like this guy was great, and this guy was great, and this guy was great. Sometimes it is like that, but it's not always like that. So it speaks a lot of volumes how many of these coaches are getting plucked for college jobs or other pro jobs. And it's not just a this year or just a last year thing. It's been going on for a very long time. John Harbaugh has somewhat of a coaching tree. John Harbaugh comes with the Andy Reid coaching tree himself, but he's kind of established some of the offensive coordinators, some of the defensive coordinators, and some head coaches in this NFL. So it's going to be interesting to see, where the Ravens go with this vacancy. Their coaching staff is pretty much all filled out now. They've worked through it all, but yeah, the Ravens have really been on that coaching carousel this offseason. It's been something to watch because they'll be different. I did talk about before, kind of earlier in the offseason here, at least the Ravens offseason, that there are going to be some changes, and the Ravens needed to make some changes. This is a team that should not and just couldn't afford to stay complacent. That is something I have preached, where I need to see growth out of this team in order to feel confident. The Ravens, it feels to me like they are taking that step to say, we're not satisfied with the wild card rounds or the divisional rounds. They haven't made an AFC championship since they won the Super Bowl back in 2013, that 2012-2013 season. So they have some work to do. I expect some major changes on the defensive front. I expect some changes in the secondary. We'll talk about that. The Ravens have a ton of free agents. They're not going to be able to re-sign everybody. There's always some turnover in the player personnel department, obviously, with just how you're going to bring guys back, who you're going to let walk, what's the money situation. And it's a whole setup, and it's a whole thing. So we'll get into that, of course, over the course of the whole offseason, and even some today here in the second and third segments with our mailbag. But the Ravens, again, after that quiet first week, it's kind of been like there's been something every day or every other day. And sometimes it's the huge news, and sometimes it's just kind of the under the radar, like, okay, like that's news, but it's not this groundbreaking, franchise altering type thing. So Ravens, they never fail to keep us on our toes. Something always happens. It seems like a lot of news breaks for them very late at night or very early in the morning, either or. They generally don't like to announce stuff during the times like between, I don't know, 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. or something like that. Although the Don Martindale thing was in the afternoon around 4. But regardless, the Ravens, a couple minor things there that we talked about. Also, there was Marquise Brown deleting all of the Ravens stuff on his social media and unfollowing the Ravens on Instagram. And that was a thing that propped up today. And it seems like he's just supporting Kyler Murray, who did the same thing with the Cardinals. He's apparently not happy with some situations there, but, we'll see. I don't think it means anything personally what Brown did, but, crazier things have happened, but I'm not worried about it. But regardless, the Ravens have, a couple minor news things there. We'll head into our first break here, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into the first batch of our mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full swing for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. So head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. Again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Our goal here, again, 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. A very lofty goal, one we've been building towards for a while. And a programming note here for the show is I've been talking for the past couple of weeks about when Mock Draft Mondays are going to start. My plans have kind of been foiled a little bit by Ravens news and Super Bowls and this, that, and the other. But Mock Draft Mondays on this show will be starting next Monday. So our next Monday episode, it'll be a Mock Draft Monday. And again, how those work is on every Sunday. I post a Mock Draft Sunday on my personal Twitter account at ChaosRecord34. And if you want to comment your mock draft down below, if you want to do a simulation on one of the many simulators out there, you can put it down below and I will talk about it on that Monday show and potentially throughout the rest of the week as well if I can't get to everybody's. But it's a fun thing to do. We do it every Monday. And unless there's like some groundbreaking Ravens news, that's what we are going to do every Monday moving forward until the NFL draft. So that's fun. But let's dive into these mailbag questions. Now we have 4 of them. So we'll do 2 in the second segment here and then 2 in the final segment. A nice little mailbag here today. So let's start off here with Kalen Hutchinson, who starts us off with kind of our surprised theme, some of the surprises the Ravens could make this offseason. He asks, which player would you most be surprised not to be a Raven next year, excluding Mr. Jackson? Well, Kalen read my mind there because I was going to say Lamar Jackson, but that seems like the obvious answer, right? So let's dive into some more, guys. I'll do 2 answers here. I'll go 1 for the actual pending free agents and 1 for somebody who is still under contract and is maybe like a salary cap casualty candidate or somebody who could be traded. The person starting in free agency who I would be surprised to not see on the Ravens next year, honestly, there are a couple, but for free agents, I'm going to honestly say Josh Bynes. I think that there are scenarios for me where I don't see Bradley Bozeman back. I don't see Anthony Averett back. I don't see Deshaun Elliott back. Patrick Ricard, Calais Campbell, etc. Like there are also scenarios where they come back. I'm not saying that they're all gone, but I think Josh Bynes was just so important to the Ravens. And it feels like there should be a veteran on this roster at that position, inside linebacker, to help Patrick Queen, to help Malik Harrison. I'm not saying that those guys need their hands held or anything, but it clearly helped on the field. I will still call Josh Bynes the savior of this Ravens defense in 2021. I mean, he made a world of difference. He understands the game. He's a very underrated player. The Ravens and Bynes can probably find a price point that works for them. And I think it's a no-brainer. Josh Bynes has also clearly stated that he would love to come back to the Ravens. And look, if the Ravens want to go in a different direction with the veteran route, if they do decide to do that and sign like a Bobby Wagner, like Bobby Wagner is a phenomenal player, and I would not be opposed to that whatsoever. But I just feel like Bynes is a type of glue guy where you can have him, and he doesn't necessarily have to be playing 80% of snaps or 90% of snaps, but he can play a role for you. He can be a veteran in that room, continue to help Patrick Queen, continue to help some of these young linebackers. And I think that's a great value signing for them. That's not going to break the bank and kind of eliminates a position of need at a relatively cheap price overall. I wouldn't expect Josh Bynes to get $10 million a year or anything. So that's somebody who I think could be one of those guys who was a pending free agent who I'd be pretty shocked to see not in a Baltimore uniform next year. In terms of guys who are on the roster, I'd be floored if Marcus Peters was not back. I'd be floored. And there are a bunch of reasons why. I mean, for one, you can literally look at Eric DeCosta's end of season press conference and be like, okay, the way Eric DeCosta is talking about Marcus Peters, there's no way that the Ravens move on from him. And the whole argument that, oh, look, if the Ravens cut Marcus Peters, they can save $10 million against the cap. Well, my counter argument to that is, where is that money going? It's going to another corner, right? Like, there are upgrades. There are better corners than Marcus Peters in the NFL. I understand that. But I think from what Marcus Peters brings this team from a personality perspective, a locker room perspective, a play perspective, right? It all combines into one to say, look, you have a player who is $15.5 million. That cap hit a little high. Like, sure. Would you like to have it lowered a bit? Sure. But I personally am not sacrificing those things I just listed for, a corner that is maybe a tier below, but a bit younger or isn't coming off of an injury. Now, if there's a guy like, we'll talk about JC Jackson. If there's a guy like JC Jackson and you have to choose between Marcus Peters and JC Jackson, that might be a little bit different of a conversation. But then again, if you already have the guy under contract and JC Jackson's supposed to make $3 million more than Peters, Jackson right now is obviously younger. He's not coming off of a super, like Peters coming off of the ACL. It's a pretty big deal at his age. Peters is pretty like skinny, frail, if whatever you want to say. And we've seen him be hobbled by certain types of injuries before in Baltimore. But I would be pretty shocked if Marcus Peters was not back. He's too important to the Ravens. Like, if the Ravens cut Marcus Peters or, get rid of Marcus Peters and sign a player like Anthony Averett, that I think is not a good move. That's something where I think Peters is, one, the better player. I think Peters provides more value. And we saw, early in the season how hard it was for this Ravens defense to adjust without Peters on the field. He brings an extra element. He's a very sneaky stripper of the football. He's kind of learned the Marlon Humphrey technique out there, trying to go for the ball. And it seems like Humphrey's rubbed off on a bunch of those guys. But yeah, for me, I don't know. Peters is just too good and too valuable of a player where you're not paying him $20 million a year. Like, maybe you could extend Peters and lower that cap hit for this year if you really wanted to go after somebody. But if you let him go into the free agent market, another team's going to get a phenomenal player. And I think that a lot of people would miss Marcus Peters when the season rolled around. But let's kind of transition into the next part here about JC Jackson, because the Ravens have been full of surprises in previous off seasons, whether it has been aggressiveness or non-aggressiveness, signing guys, not signing guys, etc. So Benji asks, could you see the Ravens signing JC Jackson in free agency? This is a very good question. JC Jackson has been linked to Baltimore by a couple of different articles that I've seen and written up. And there have been, some rumblings about, hey, could the Ravens go and add a top flight corner? I think there is a strong possibility they seriously look at it. And some of the claims to back that up are, what did the Ravens try to do at the trade deadline, or reportedly tried to do at the trade deadline? They tried to add Xavier Howard, one of the best corners in the game, to a group that already had Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. Now, granted, Peters wasn't playing at that point, but it feels to me like we have seen the Ravens with 3 quality corners for a very, very long time. Like, they value their secondary more than a lot of positions on their roster. They build that secondary, they spend money in that secondary. And soon we're going to have to see some of that shift, the money on the defense shifting to the offense. We've already seen it a little bit, but obviously with Lamar Jackson, that's going to create a pretty big shift overall in terms of the actual dollars. But for the Ravens, the question with JC Jackson, well, there are 2. One we kind of covered a little bit in terms of, would you cut Marcus Peters if you could sign JC Jackson to a 4-year, $80 million deal? The thing, though, is that corners are a premium position. JC Jackson is one of the best corners on the market, if not the best corner on the market, depending on who you talk to. And I think that Jackson could command upwards of $20 million a year, $22 million a year. Now, Jalen Ramsey's making money. he and a bunch of these other top flight corners in terms of the actual corner contracts and salary. I mean, Jalen Ramsey's averaging 20 a year. Marlon Humphrey's the second highest paid corner in the league with 19.5. Marshawn Lattimore, 19.4. Tre'Davious White, 17.25. Then it kind of drops to the 16 millions with Darius Slay, Byron Jones, et cetera, et cetera. So the question becomes, right, are you paying a guy like Marcus Peters, who's averaging 14 a year? Are you paying a guy like Marcus Peters that and bringing on J.C. Jackson with Marlon Humphrey and Peters? And that's your big ticket signing. Just, say, all right, secondary is our thing. We're not getting burned there again. Let's do it. Or are you cutting Marcus Peters and bringing in J.C. Jackson instead and not having that big three, but having the big two and then doing whatever? It's a tough question to answer. And it feels like for the Ravens, they could surprise people and add that cornerback and not get rid of Peters and be like, hey, we're going to have 3 top flight corners and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, try to throw on us. It's not going to happen. Like the Bengals, but what the Bengals do when the Bengals had T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, they didn't draft Penei Sewell. They didn't draft Rashawn Slater. It was Jamar Chase, and it turned out to be the right pick for him. And Jamar Chase had a phenomenal rookie season. Now it's different between the draft and free agency, right? In terms of dollars, in terms of positions of need, how you spend there. But if the Ravens want to match the Bengals and the Bengals trio of wide receivers, and you say, hey, we're going to give you Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters and J.C. Jackson and Tavon Young, that's a team that no one wants to throw on. Plus, you have Chuck Clark in the back end, what you can do with Brandon Stevens or Deshaun Elliott, whoever you bring back there. That's a very tantalizing, I'd say, proposition. So I don't think the possibility is zero. The Ravens would just have to commit a lot of money, especially with the salary cap not being what it was last year. There are going to be a lot more of those big contracts than we were used to seeing last offseason when the cap just wasn't what it usually is. Now the cap is, back to pretty normal. So that's a big question to answer. I like J.C. Jackson a lot. I think he's one of the better corners in the NFL for sure. But again, are you paying 3 cornerbacks upwards of $10, $12 million a year? That's a tough ask for a lot of teams, especially for a Ravens team that has other needs elsewhere. And, if they put all that money into a cornerback that is a premium position and that other teams will very likely be trying to sign, are you going to be able to get enough pieces at your other positions? That's the other question that people need to think about a little bit and say, is it worth it in that way? We'll head into our final break, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into our final batch of mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. This is the time of year that people just give up on their New Year's resolutions, but don't do that this year. Stick to your resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. If you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. The Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy and marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat. The Puffs are a fan favorite with many incredible flavors, and all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and that includes the Puffs. They're low calorie, high protein. They have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. They have so many delicious flavors. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're back here with our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you talking Ravens football, because why wouldn't we talk Ravens football on Locked On Ravens? And we're going to dive into our final 2 mailbag questions, and we'll start off here with a question from JP, who asks, was it surprising to see Steve Saunders return as head strength and conditioning coach when there were so many injuries last year? Granted, not all the blame can be put on him, but he did have prior issues as a coach too. And so, yeah, Steve Saunders has been in the controversy news for a couple of years now for the Ravens, as he, allegedly started that COVID outbreak for them by, being pretty careless with his mask, and the Ravens decided to bring him back. And then all the injuries happened in 2021. So a lot of fans are not happy with Steve Saunders, but the Ravens did bring him back. I wouldn't say there was shock to me. Like, there were clear avenues where I could say, yeah, there's no way the Ravens bring him back, but it seems like the Ravens have their plan. And it's kind of like what I've been saying about Greg Roman, where you want to implement the changes and see what they can do with them. And if the year doesn't go as planned, then you say, all right, this has clearly been multiple years now of just injuries decimating the team year out. But the thing is with Saunders, this is not just a 2021 thing. It's been this way. The Ravens in 2020 weren't exactly healthy, right? They lost a couple of key players to injuries and had a bunch of nagging things. 2019 was actually pretty healthy for them. Like, they didn't really lose a ton of people. I've talked about that before. But you can look at this team and you can say injuries have been a problem for a lot of years if you go back. And look, every NFL team deals with the injuries. I get it. But just with the prior thing, with the COVID outbreak and all the injuries, there was a situation where the Ravens probably could have just said, look, this is all here. We need to move in a different direction. But John Harbaugh clearly feels confident that the Ravens can figure out their injury issues, and they're going through all these meetings and they're trying to implement new plans. And so with Roman, the thing was, yeah, there were too many injuries to assess his performance. I think they're just giving him another year to say, can you do it with a healthy offense? If you can't, then you're probably not coming back. For Saunders, I think it's hey, this is probably your last shot here. If we implement these plans and we work with you and everybody to get these things in place and it still doesn't help and the injuries still aren't working out, we might need to just alter the training methods and just do everything, start over from scratch. And that's where Saunders probably gets the boot. So I wouldn't say I was shocked or surprised by it. I mean, I was kind of like, okay, if it happens, I get it. If it doesn't happen, I get it. But I think many people did want to see a change there, and it's understandable why. And I don't blame people for wanting a change. But I think this might be the final year where it's like, all right, if the injuries don't improve or significantly improve, because honestly, how could it get worse? I really don't want to see that. But if it doesn't work out there, then I can say, okay, 2022 probably might be the last year for Saunders if they can't get it figured out there. But finally, let's talk about a question from B Ward, who asks, having impact players on the defensive/offensive line is critical to get to and win the Super Bowl. Who do you believe is the perfect free agent signing? Who would you take at 14 in the draft? I would love for the Ravens to sign Akeem Hicks and draft Linderbaum or Ikwanu. And yeah, this is a good question and kind of stuff we've talked about here on the show before, because I completely agree. The trenches are the key here. And I will say it again. I've said it so many times here on this show. When you look at what the Ravens need and just any NFL team needs, the offensive line is such a key. And that's not even talking about the defensive line, but we saw in the Super Bowl what happened when Joe Burrow and this high-powered Cincinnati offense went up against that stout Rams defensive line, and the Bengals offensive line was just not good. Joe Burrow did not have time to run his offense. He did not have time to go through his reads. It was disaster. You know, the Bengals tied the record in the Super Bowl for most sacks taken by a team. So I'll say this again too, for any quarterback, any player, regardless of, you know, how good your receivers are, how good your running backs are, how good your tight ends are, even how good your quarterback is if you're the team. If you don't have an offensive line blocking well, and there's a defensive player in the backfield every 1 second, there's not a lot of players can do. And Lamar Jackson is one of the players where you can say, hey, he can do something here. But we saw firsthand without a quality offensive line that Jackson was running for his life, that the pocket was collapsing. He was having to go through his reads quicker, making decisions, and that hurt his decision-making. So I agree. The trenches are the way to go, especially on the defensive line as well. We were talking about a Ravens run defense that was very, very good. I mean, it was the top defense in the NFL in terms of rushing defense. But I think the pass rush from the interior, it has to get better. You know, we've talked about it before where, you know, how do they generate that pressure from the interior? They back to the Michael Pierce and Brandon Williams days where the Ravens didn't want those two big guys in the middle who couldn't really generate the pressure. They're bringing Calais Campbell. They bring in Derek Wolfe. Those guys can't really do anything in 2 years with the Ravens, whether it's injuries or just plain lack of production. So perfect free agent signings for me. On the offensive line, I think it's Bradley Bozeman. I mean, Bozeman fits what the Ravens do. He's not going to necessarily like overpower people. He kind of just fits them in terms of his mobility, his versatility. He has familiarity. He's not this like, oh, he's a top center in the NFL. You know, that's not what it is, but he is a quality player for them. I don't think that he breaks the bank. Like, I don't think he does that. I think there is a path where the price point is what the Ravens can pay. And the issue with Tyler Linderbaum for me is he's a bit small, and the scheme fit might not be what the Ravens need right now. But the issue with that is Linderbaum is by far and away the best center in the draft. And then there is a pretty steep drop-off. And I'm not saying that other rookie centers can't come in, but the perfect signing for me would be Bradley Bozeman and just saying, hey, let's do this again. The Bozeman-Zeitler combo was great. Bozeman and Zeitler were the two bright spots on that offensive line, and obviously what Patrick McCary was able to do. So, yeah, I think Bozeman is my choice there. I'd love to see him back in Baltimore, but if Bozeman does leave, depending on what Ryan Jensen wants in free agency, maybe that's what you do. You get that bully ball. I mean, we all know here in Baltimore what Ryan Jensen does in the run game, in the pass game. He's a nasty dude, and he lays guys out. He makes his presence known physically, and he protects his quarterbacks. I'm not saying the Ravens offensive linemen don't, but look, he protects his guys. He goes to war for his guys. So I'm excited to kind of see where this free agency goes in terms of the offensive line. I don't really see them making a move for a guard or a tackle unless it's kind of like an above replacement Alejandro Villanueva type player or just a veteran guard type guy. I think the Ravens really look to the draft for their tackle of the future at right tackle and then get a player who can be a versatile left tackle, right tackle option. Again, kind of a higher quality player than Villanueva, but not necessarily the, hey, we're going to break the bank for you type deal. On the defensive line, I think Larry Ogunjobi is my pick in terms of value and play and what the Ravens need. I mean, he is a phenomenal interior pass rusher. He can do some stuff in the run game as well. The Bengals will probably, not guaranteed, but they might have to choose between Ogunjobi and BJ Hill. And the way BJ Hill played for them in 2021 was outstanding. I mean, the Bengals got BJ Hill and a 6th-round pick for Billy Price, and Billy Price played horrendously for the Giants in 2021. So I think the Bengals might choose Hill over Ogunjobi. And I like Ogunjobi a lot. I think he's what they need at a very good price point for them. He's not going to be a break-the-bank type player. You can probably get him on a 2-3 year deal that fits the Ravens' budget at that position, while also maybe bringing back one of their veterans like Calais Campbell or Brandon Williams, depending on where they go. With that, it could also impact the other players they bring in from outside the organization. I like Akeem Hicks too as well. That's kind of the we're going to break the bank a little bit more type thing. Hicks is a dominant player. And it's kind of like the Bobby Wagner of the defensive line for the Ravens, where it's like, if you want to go and spend that extra dollar, I think that's a perfectly fine way to do things because the trenches are very, very important. The Ravens have a ton of money invested in their secondary. The defensive line, that money's coming off the books a little bit. So I think for me, Akeem Hicks would be great. And Ike Ekwonu is my dream. He's probably not going to fall. There's a very little chance he falls. But if the Ravens can snag Ike Ekwonu out of NC State, it would be a glorious day. If Ekwonu falls to like 10, I'm trading up. I don't care what it takes. If he falls to 8, I'm trading up. I don't even care at that point. I'm saying, hey, this guy is so good. He's value there. I mean, it's almost like what people are talking about with Kyle Hamilton, where it's like, if Kyle Hamilton falls to 8 or to 9, are you trading up? Absolutely, I'm trading up. Like that's a generational player. You know, we can't say that now, but he has the potential to be a generational player. So I'm on board for Ike Ekwonu. That's my guy. But in free agency, I think the Ravens they have the room to make a splash. You know, the Ravens, nobody expected them to really sign Earl Thomas, right? It was kind of like a whoa, like that's a surprise, but the Ravens did it. They understood the player he was. Now, obviously, it didn't work out there, but I think that that a player that they signed in free agency can really provide them that if they go the splash route. They didn't really make one outside of Zeitler, and that really wasn't a quote-unquote splash, like, hey, we're going to pay you $15 million a year type deal, but it was a quality one. Now I think they could look to address a splash type move, whether it is Tyrann Mathieu or Akeem Hicks or Bobby Wagner or Ryan Jensen, whoever you want to classify as that, J.C. Jackson. You know, I think that the Ravens could definitely make that and be more of like a surprise type move for them. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk, of course, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.